Hello, everybody. This is Brightest podcast. I'm Gabe Klim, and as announced last week, today we will be talking about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. If you haven't seen this movie, I would suggest that you turn away from this podcast for the time being because I will be spoiling it, and also viewer discretion to this movie because it has a big horror aspect. It's very scary themed, and it does have violence language like most MCU movies. I will say that this one, though, it does kind of loosen the reins of what a MCU movie would allow in a lot of the violence aspect, and it is very witchcraft driven. Of course, it's the Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange, so there is going to be wizardry and stuff like that. So if you don't want to see that, I would suggest you probably hold off on seeing this movie. But if you're like me and you know that this is purely entertainment based, then you shouldn't have a problem. But before we hop into the movie and the lesson behind the movie, let's talk about our who would win question. If you have seen the movie, then you know that the Illuminati was introduced in this movie, which I feel like is a big deal, but we'll get into that in a second. So I wanted to take two of these members and pin them against each other, which is John Krasinski's Reed Richards' Mr. Fantastic, which was probably the best thing about this movie. I mean, sure, they had a lot of people coming back, like Xavier, Black Bolt, all of them coming back to fulfill their roles, but I feel like John Krasinski's coming in and being Mr. Fantastic was a big deal because we've heard rumors about this for years, and then the fact that out of the blue they just do it, because we really had no prior knowledge of him being in this film. But we're gonna do who would win, Mr. Fantastic or Captain Carter, who was, of course, played by Haley Atwell, which I felt like that was also a really cool thing to see because we've seen this version of her character in What If, and then seeing again live action. I thought that was really cool. But comment on Facebook, YouTube, Blogger, wherever you find us, who would win in this fight. So let's hop into this movie. I mean, I see what they were doing with this movie, but I will say this wasn't the best MCU film in my opinion. I feel like the execution of a lot of things were drawn out or just had no info whatsoever. I feel like they were pushing this one issue of Wanda when this issue should have already been resolved in WandaVision. She's seen the error of her ways, and yet she's still fighting for her kids and Vision and everything. And I'll be honest, my biggest problem with this movie is how they did Wanda. I feel like they really messed up that character. She shouldn't have been killed off in the end. That's a big deal to me. She shouldn't have went on a killing spree, which I'll get to that. And like I just said, she shouldn't have been still in this, well, I'm gonna go find my kids issue, because that was resolved, or so we thought. I mean, I will say this movie had great potential. It had the idea of this big mind-blowing film, but it just didn't turn out that way. I'd say the biggest part of this movie was the introduction of the Illuminati. And just seeing them killed off 5 minutes later, that's a really wasteful move in my opinion. I mean, even who they selected to be in this Illuminati, because you have its original members who we know, or should know if you follow comics, and you only used about half of them. And the members that you replaced them with, they still need to work. Sure, I just said that Captain Carter, that was a cool choice to see in live action, but Captain America wasn't even part of the Illuminati. So what was the mindset there? Captain Marvel is probably the one that I had the issue with, because for one, if you're gonna use a character like that, why make a new adaptation of that character when you have a unused one? Why not go to that original black costume with the yellow lightning bolt and everything? I felt like that would have been a really cool choice, and they just didn't do it. They brought in the new Captain Marvel, and I mean, she did fine. She acted like a Captain Marvel variant, but I just believe there should have been more there. And there should have been more in the Illuminati in general, because you set up this big, powerful force, and then Wanda just comes in and wipes them out. I felt like that was just... And they can still go into these stories. I mean, look at John Krasinski as Reed Richards. They can still use him in that role and just make it a different universe. And, I mean, they set up the multiverse as this thing like, oh, anything can happen now. But I also feel like there's a lot of dead space now that they're not going to go into. But anyways, the main message of this movie is moving on. I mean, that's really been a major theme in the MCU in general. And in this movie, we have Stephen Strange, which I will say is a very good part of this movie. I haven't even mentioned him yet, and it's his movie. He did amazing. I love Cumberbatch. Great character. One of my favorites in the MCU. But he has to move on from Christine, and we see him slowly doing this throughout the film, and I feel like we get that clarification at the end. Wanda is, of course, not moving on from her kids, Vision, and even at times Quicksilver. Which I feel like you can't dwell in your past. I feel like that destroys a lot of people. It's destroyed me many times. I've worried about things that have happened, things that I could have changed and that I didn't change, and it destroys me. And I feel like that's what happened here with Wanda. So really what we need to learn from this movie is you need to move on from mistakes. I even think I've talked about it on this podcast before. You can't sit here in your wrongdoing. You have to actually take the steps to fix things. Philippians 3:13 and 14 basically says, "One thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining towards what is ahead, I press on." That is really what we need to do a lot of times. We can't sit here in our wrongdoing and believe that things are going to get better if we just sit around, woe is me, acting like the world is against us. We have to take a step forward into what we are called to be in, because a lot of the times that mistake that we are sitting in, it's God sitting here trying to wake us up. It's a sign that, hey, I need you here. You can't just be where you're at. I need you to move forward. And that's why we need to, in fact, move forward. Jesus says in John 13:7, "You do not realize what I am doing, but later you will understand." He has this plan, and it's going to be a hard road to follow along with. I mean, he's going to push you in areas you don't want to be pushed. That's Christianity. That's building you up to be where you need to be. And he's doing it because he loves you. You ever notice when parents tell their kids not to do something, and the kid's like, well, why? And the parent always says, because I said so. That's not them just trying to tell you what you can and can't do. They're doing it to protect you. Sure, you don't understand it at this moment, but later on you will, and you'll realize, hey, this helped me. This is actually building me up. So therefore you need to move on from this state of destruction and sadness and all of this mess, and you need to move to where God needs you to be. Even with relationships, God will take people out of your life that don't need to be in your life. And you'll sit there and you'll be like, God, why did you do this? I needed that person. They were my happiness. No, God should be your happiness. I mean, you're literally replacing God with these people, and yeah, that's not what you should be doing. And in doing this, you're basically giving yourself to that person so that they can just decide, well, I don't like them this day, I'm just going to destroy them now. And then leave you at nothing. So yeah, God is going to try to remove these people from your life. And sure, you're going to be mad at the moment, but later on you're going to be realizing, hey, these people were bad for me. So there's a reason why you need to move on. You can't get the blessing if you're still sitting where you were destroyed. I really hope that makes sense. I know I ranted for a little bit. I didn't mean to. I'm not mad at you guys. I promise. That was more for me than it was for you guys. But really, what this movie is saying is you need to learn to move on. And all things aside, it was a very good movie, and I'm sure that some people loved it. And there is reason to love it, but I didn't see the appeal of it. So I'm sorry if you're listening to this and you're like, I hate him now, this was a great movie. Well, I just gave you my opinion, and I hope that it was okay. But that is the message that I got from Dr. Strange, the Multiverse of Madness. You guys have a great week, and God bless.